All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Luke's MTG. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a deck that I really like in the current meta post banned and restricted announcement. Of course, if you're not familiar with the banned and restricted announcement as it pertains to modern, Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, and Faithless Looting were banned, and Stoneforge Mystic was unbanned. So the format was very homogeneous. Even the day before the banned and restricted announcement, we saw 5 Hogak decks in the top 8 of GP Vegas. So what does his absence as well as the absence of Faithless Looting mean? Well, the graveyard decks are certainly going to become a lot less prominent. Like Is It Phoenix is a big player. That deck heavily relied on Faithless Looting. Dredge is also going to suffer a little bit. And obviously, without Hogak, the Hogak deck is no more. There's just nothing left there. Okay. We saw the kind of rising of Jund throughout the meta in the last month or so, thanks to Wrenn and 6, as well as the green-black cycling land, Nurturing Peatland, and the introduction of the cycling lands from the Urzas and Onslaught blocks. So, one thing to note is this deck does struggle against Jund a little bit. However, the presence of Jund kind of tells us that we're going to see decks like Blue-White Control and Tron in the upcoming meta. And Blue-Green Infect is a deck that's pretty good against those two particular decks because it's so quick and they lack some early interaction. Blue-White Control, of course, does have Path to Exile and Oust. However, their deck isn't completely full of 1-mana removal spells like Jund, Abzan even. And in a format where we see a lot more Stoneforge Mystics, which I have so far, this is definitely going to be something that I like, given our flying creatures and our unblockable creatures. So, Blue-Green Infect. What are we trying to do here? Well, Infect is a keyword ability that basically makes it so creatures do not deal combat damage to players. They instead leave poison counters. So, like for example here, if we hit our opponent with this Blighted Agent directly, they're not going to go to 19 life. They're instead going to remain at 20, and they're going to get 1 poison counter. And once a player has a total of 10 poison counters, they lose the game. Okay, so how can we take advantage of that, given we have a lot of 1/1s with the Inkmoth Nexus, Glistener Elf, and the Blighted Agent? Well, we can play cards like Vines of the Vastwood, Become Immense, Scale Up. So the purpose of this deck is to create the largest Infect creature possible and kill our opponent in 1 to 2 hits. So that way we don't have to deal the full 20 damage. So this deck is broken up into a couple different components. We have threats. Those are all going to be right here. Glistener Elf, 1 mana, 1/1 Infect. We've got Blighted Agent, 2 mana, 1/1 Infect, and it can't be blocked. Then, of course, we've got Inkmoth Nexus, which is a land. So, just costs 1 mana to make a 1/1 artifact creature with flying and Infect. So that's going to be our threats. Next thing we have here are going to be pump spells. We have quite a few pump spells. In fact, it looks like we have about 24 pump spells. Bit of a difference between Vines of the Vastwood, Blossoming Defense, and the rest of them. Vines of the Vastwood can make something hexproof, so can Blossoming Defense, and they can pump them as well if you're able to kick the Vines of the Vastwood. Next, we've got the regular pump cards, which just add power and toughness, and that's about it. The most recent addition, coming from Modern Horizons, being Scale Up. For 1 mana, it is at sorcery speed, but it provides a pretty significant increase to the power and toughness of our creatures. I mean, it's basically +5, +3 for a total of 1 mana. So, I mean, you can kill your opponent on turn 2. For example, if you have a Glistener Elf, and then the next turn you have Scale Up and Might of Old Krosa, you just kill your opponent on turn 2, and that's not entirely uncommon. So we've got all these pump spells here. Distortion Strike just makes it unblockable and gets +1/+0. Also has Rebound, which is kind of nice. Groundswell gives it +2/+2. Otherwise, +4/+4 with a Landfall. Might of Old Krosa gives it +2/+2 or +4/+4 if cast in your main phase. Mutagenic Growth is a nice one. Phyrexian green, so it can, cost 0 mana, gives it +2/+2. Then we've got Become Immense. So, Become Immense used to be one of the more popular cards in this deck. Obviously, +6/+6, that's a pretty immense amount of Infect coming your way. However, Scale Up is just easier to get off, and I think it's just better. So then the last little bit we have here that make up the different pieces of this deck are going to be some disruption. So Spellskite can change the target. This deck is very vulnerable to removal spells. Lightning Bolt, Fatal Push, Path to Exile. All things that are pretty difficult to deal with given that we're so threat low. So the Spellskite can absorb that, repeatedly in the case of something like a Lightning Bolt. Also have Spell Pierce, just a cheap counter spell, and we have Dismember to clear out any creatures that may stand in our way, or, perhaps kill something like a, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, that is disrupting our ability to cast multiple spells in a turn. Last little piece of this deck that we've got is going to be the mana producing sources that also offer a boost to our creatures. So we've got Pendelhaven. It's a legendary land that can add a green mana or make a 1/1 that we have +1/+2. You got to make sure that the creature is actually a 1/1 as this ability resolves, otherwise it won't resolve. I've also got Noble Hierarch, just provides us some extra mana and some exalted triggers as well. And lastly, let's take a look at the sideboard. Grafdigger's Cage is going to be for any graveyard matchups. Dredge is still a pretty decent deck, and there's some other strategies floating around there as well. Like the Goryo's Vengeance decks I don't really see, but, it's there. Ceremonious Rejection against big colorless spells like Eldrazi, Tron, and Tron. Pithing Needle's really nice, especially against something like Wrenn and 6. I mentioned Jund being a really big player in the meta right now. And Wrenn and 6 is just, we have an extremely difficult time beating it. It basically kills all of our threats. So we want a Pithing Needle to help that. Dispel, against the decks that have instant speed removal. Distortion Strike against more creature decks. We got Shaper's Sanctuary, which is a pretty cool card. 1-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell or ability, you get to draw a card. So, in games where we want to go a little bit long, well, we don't necessarily want to go long in this deck. What I mean to say is, in games where we know we're going to have to go longer, this is going to allow us to get a card out of our creature being removed. We've also got Ichorclaw Mirror. So, again, this is an Infect threat, something that I usually like to board in when we have a bit of a grindier game to play. Just having an additional threat is nice, and this also attacks pretty well. 3/3 Infect is something that's going to be difficult to contend with. We've got Reality Shift to deal with some difficult creatures like Reality Smasher, Thought-Knot Seer. We've also got Return to Nature, so it can kill an artifact, enchantment, or exile a card from a graveyard. One more Dismember against creature decks, and one that I've been trying out recently that I saw on, I think, Reddit. We got Wild Defiance here, so 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control becomes a target of an instant or sorcery spell, gets +3/+3 till end of turn. So obviously this is going to be really nice where our resources are heavily taxed, or if we see counter spells, something like that. This is going to allow our single spells, like let's say we just have 1 mutagenic growth. This is going to allow it to get +5/+5 rather than just the old +2/+2 if we were to have this and threat down. Another thing I really like about this is it prevents your creatures from dying to Lightning Bolt. It works on your instants and sorceries as well as your opponents. So, there's a pretty in-depth look. Oh, one thing I'd like to mention before I move on is the Waterlogged Grove. This is another addition for Modern Horizons. This deck just, it relies on having a threat and lots of different spells to make it work. We only have 20 lands here, and if we end up flooding a little bit, the Waterlogged Grove can help us either, look for that last piece or at least mitigate our flood a little bit. So that is Modern Blue-Green Infect, and let's go ahead and get into some games. I think I'm going to go ahead and do the 2-player queue, spend some play points here. Hopefully our opponents will be a little more serious about their games. I've mainly been playing tournament practice on this channel, and I know that people prefer to see something that's a little more competitive oriented, but so far we don't have the play points for the competitive leagues. One disadvantage, of course, is going to be the wait time for this. And I think there's going to be no refunds. No, we don't want to open up info. Come on. This is just something I'm going to have to edit out in post. You know what, let's just leave. Look at that, we get our play points back. So let's get into tournament practice so we can at least show some games. So again, in a meta where we can expect to see more Tron, more blue-white control, and more fair decks, you know, this is just kind of a creature-based combo deck that can win on turn 2. So let's take a look here. We've got 2 Pendlehavens and a Noble Hierarch, Might of Volcrosa, a Spellskite. So we've got Noble Hierarch, we've got some ways to pump our creatures, but we actually have no threats. And I've learned that you really, really have to have a threat with this particular deck. And here we have 2 threats. So let's go ahead and keep this. And I think what we're going to do is bottom the Misty Rainforest. So I think we're just going to go for Aether Vial. So probably against goblins here, perhaps. Let's just go ahead and go for the Noble Hierarch here. We're just going to fetch a forest for now. We got plenty of blue sources. Want to keep our life total nice and high against the goblins deck. Worth noting that I don't have any, you know, indication that we're playing against goblins so far, you know, but Aether Vial Blood Crypt is kind of a good way to tell. And here we see Steam Vents, so a bit of a strange deck. I'm wondering if this is the Elementals deck. And indeed it is. Alright. So let's go ahead and get this Waterlogged Grove out. Get our Blighted Agent out. And we do have lethal if our opponent does not have something to deal with this Blighted Agent. We've got 6 power with the scale up. Then when we play our land, Groundswell gives in an additional 4. So our opponent has to remove this with some kind of removal spell or die. Alright, so there's a 10 power Infect creature, and looks like we won the game. So go ahead and note the turn number here. That's turn 3 on the draw. So this game can win pretty quickly. Okay, so our opponent has got Smoke Braider and Shriekmaw and Aether Vial. So what are some of the things that we want? Not really super familiar with this deck. If they have several creatures, I'm immediately going to go for the Distortion Strike. I also like Dismember. Let's see what else here. Also Reality Shift. Like, we're just going to want to get creatures out of the way here. Return to Nature. I mean, you don't really want to kill an Aether Vial. It's not what you, not what you want to do. Ichorclaw Mirror could be a good way to help prevent their blockers from getting in our way. What are some of the things that we don't want? Let's see here. Usually one of the first things that I will board out is going to be Become Immense. It's just kind of our worst one. It's difficult to make work. We only have one, so you know we're not going to see it that often anyways, and probably not miss its effect too much. Let's see here. Might of Volcrosa. I like a little bit better than Groundswell just because it's more easy to make that effect come online. So let's go ahead and bring these 4 cards in. And one thing that you got to be careful with is you don't want to trim too many of your pieces. This is a combo deck, and of course you need threats and you need pump spells. So if you get rid of too many threats, you know, which I will basically never do in this deck, is board out a threat. You know, then you're threat light and you're vulnerable to removal. If you get rid of too many pump spells, you can't close the game quite fast enough. So there's always a balance of that. So usually what I like to do is I like to trim, you know, one of each of my, what I consider to be the worst ones. Let's see. The ones that are more expensive on the draw are usually what I'll go for. So let's go ahead and cut a Vines of the Vastwood. Mutagenic growth is nice, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of a Might of Old Krosa. So that's what we're going to do against this Aether Vial Elementals deck. Let's take a look here. So we have two threats with the Ichorclaw Myrrh and the Inkmoth Nexus. We've also got some Disruption here, and we've got a Pump Spell. This hand isn't great. However, I think I'm probably going to keep it. You know, we have a ton of pump spells in our deck, and I'm pretty comfortable, you know, looking to draw. Or I'm pretty comfortable on kind of relying on drawing into that. And of course our opponent mulligans, which is kind of nice for us. Ooh, there's a Blighted Agent. So I'm going to get down the Inkmoth Nexus right away. If you know that you're going to be casting multiple green spells, and it's usually smart to get down your green sources first, but because we have a colorless and a blue threat here, we're going to go that route. So let's see what we draw. We draw a Reality Shift. So we're going to want our blue source down here right away for the two different cards we have. The question is, do we play Ichorclaw Myrrh or do we play Blighted Agent? Let's see, I value the Blighted Agent a little more in the long game, so I think we're going to play the Ichorclaw Myrrh now. That way our opponent can't block it with a 1-1 and just trade off, so this will do a pretty good job of fighting through all the chump blockers that we may end up seeing from our opponent. You know, we can attack with that, and we can also perhaps use Pendelhaven. Oh, so unless our opponent has Dismember, I don't expect that we're going to see any kind of removal out of our opponent. Spite Bellows. Okay, so this is where it's nice to have the Inkmoth Nexus. So the Inkmoth Nexus, it is a little frustrating that that you have to pay 1 mana to activate it every turn, but it is quite good against sorcery speed removal. In fact, it is, you know, pretty much immune to sorcery speed removal. Okay, so what do we want to do here? I kind of want to leave up the Spell Pierce, though we may not want that at all. I think that we would be smart just to get rid of our opponent's well, I can't really say life total because we are giving them poison counters. So here I'm choosing to use the Pendelhaven rather than pumping that because I do plan to do my Inkmoth Nexus. So we're going to get to put down 2 Infect now, and then next turn we can, I think we'll sequence it Pendelhaven to pump it, and then scale up, and then the Noble Hierarch, which will be the remaining 8 poison that we need. You know, if our opponent is playing Spite Bellows and Shriek Maw, then I'm fairly confident that they're not going to have a lot of instant speed removal. And if they do, you know, we'll make sure to play our land first so that we can hold up Spell Pierce against something like a Lightning Bolt or Path to Exile. Risen Reef. All right. Risen Reef, very, very good card. You know, it's a repeatable Coiling Oracle. However, it does not have reach and it does not have flying. Alright. We can just get a forest here and we'll just have to pay attention. Okay, so let's go ahead and activate our guy. let us scale up the ink moth. Oh, we just made a mistake. We were supposed to activate the Pendlehaven first. That's okay. So here's what we can do instead to kind of fix that. We can play our next Noble Hierarch, and then we can attack. There we go, and there's the match. So turn 4 win. Let's get into the next game here. Not bad. So 2-0 versus the Elementals deck. Okay, so what do we have here? We have no threats. You know, technically Noble Hierarch can be considered a threat. However, I prefer to just have the Infect. And because we are going to be on the play, I want to mulligan to a threat. And here we have a Blighted Agent. So I like the Noble Hierarchs just because we don't have to use spells. So they give us mana and their repeated pump. So let's just go ahead and get down a Forest and a Noble Hierarch. And we'll see what our opponent has. Anytime you're playing... Ooh, Urborg. So perhaps green-black rock. Yeah, Fatal Push on our Noble Hierarch. Not thrilled about that, but... Now let's see. I think we just want to get those Blighted Agent down as soon as possible. Come on. Here we go. One annoying thing about Urborg on MTGO is it adds an extra layer for trying to tap your lands that only tap for one color. But, you know, if we need to cast a Dismember, which we bottomed in the future, we got some extra help to do so. Let's see what our opponent has. Bloodghast. So, Bloodghast definitely is not going to be able to block this particular Blighted Agent. So, how much poison do we have? So if we have the Noble Hierarch, we got 2. And I think I'm comfortable just doing that next turn, since we can attack for 8 poison next turn. Certainly not going to block that. You know, of course, Bloodghast unable to block. Not that it matters, as the Blighted Agent is unblockable. So I think I'm going to fetch at the next opportunity. I just don't want to get caught trying to fetch. Dead of Winter. So, how many snow permanents do they have? They have 1 snow permanent. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn a Blossoming Defense here to help keep my Blighted Agent alive. Of course, we're going to lose the Noble Hierarch, but our opponent's going to lose their Bloodghast. But we get to keep our Blighted Agent. And check it out. Looks like we are going to be able to defeat our opponent. Let's go ahead and cast this with Kicker, and we're going to attack for 9 poison. Let's try our best not to skip through our attack step. There we go. So that's a turn 4 victory against Mono Black, whatever it ends up being. Okay, so I don't know that Bloodghast is necessarily enough to say we want Grafdigger's Cage. We saw Dead of Winter, and we also saw Fatal Push. So what are some of the things that we want here? So Wild Defiance is not going to protect our creatures against Fatal Push like Lightning Bolt would. I think we want an extra threat here. Dead of Winter obviously can clear out multiple threats, and we'll just have to, you know, try to play around that as best we can in the future. Grafdigger's Cage is just kind of marginal. Like Bloodghast can't even block our guy, and you know, we can certainly kill our opponent a lot faster than they can kill us, at least, you know, from what we've seen so far. Let's see, Dispel can counter a Fatal Push, but again, we're not, you know, not totally in the loop with what our opponent's doing. I like Dispel Pierces here because it can get rid of the Dead of Winter. Shaper Sanctuary can just draw some extra cards. So, what do we want to take out here? Again, I like removing the Become Immense. Vines of Vastwood is the most expensive one, so we're going to cut that on the draw. And then I think Groundswell is one of our weaker pump spells. It can act as a 1 mana +4, but we have to have our land drops for that. And sometimes, you know, we can be a little constrained on land, in which case I'd rather have the free mutagenic growth. Wow. So we have just about all the threats in the world. Inkmoth Nexus is going to be able to attack pretty frequently here. So, I mean, we just have a ton of threats, and ones that are difficult to interact with. You know, Dead of Winter can't clear out Inkmoth Nexus. So I think because we're on the draw, we're going to go ahead and get this Inkmoth Nexus down right away. And Inquisition. They take the Blighted Agent, even though we have a ton of... And there we go. That's just how it works when our opponents are playing Inquisition decks. They take... you know, they take your card and you just draw another one. You know, it's kind of how it feels when you're playing these Inquisition decks. I've had that experience many times myself. Okay. So, what do we want to do here? I think we can go ahead and get down the Blighted Agent. If our opponent has a Fatal Push, then we lose a land. And I'd rather not get set back a land. So I think we're going to go ahead and throw this Blighted Agent down. That way, if our opponent has a removal spell, we get to keep this, and we'll have an extra green mana to do some kind of pumping. So here I'd probably expect Fatal Push to kill the Blighted Agent, but... Oh, no. It looked like they were paying costs for a minute. Dead of Winter. Yikes, that is a tough way to do it. Let's go ahead and get down this Inkmoth Nexus. One thing that you need to be careful with these creature man lands, you want to right-click, and if it says newly controlled, that's the one you want to add the mana with. You don't want to accidentally use the one that is capable of attacking to... I think here we're just going to go for the poison. We don't have anything else to do. You don't want to accidentally tap your creature that can attack. That feels pretty bad. So we're going to get our opponent to 5 poison. And we've got some pretty good sorcery speed removal resistant threats here. We do have lots of lands, but thankfully we've got these to offer us plenty to do with our mana. And I think I'm probably going to get down the next Inkmoth Nexus. I'm just planning on tapping all of my mana here to make these Inkmoth Nexus into critters. I have no need for the Blossoming Defense. I'd rather save it until we can just kill our opponent. Liliana's Triumph. Alright. You got it. And there, you know, it's not too bad for our opponent to trade that with a land, but we've still got plenty of threats. So they cycle Unearth. Not really sure what our opponent's deck is doing here. Maybe just a mono-black control deck. You know, Bloodghast is kind of a nice recursive threat. Smallpox. So we got plenty of things to discard. And I think we're going to, since we're running a little light on threats, I want to sacrifice this Breeding Pool. Fortunately, Bloodghast cannot block. So here we're looking for a, yeah, Liliana doesn't really bother us, but we're going to need to, I think, discard this Forest, because we're going to want a blue card. So if we draw any of our 4 mana... Yep, not quite what we were looking for. So let's think. I think we just want to keep getting in for as much poison as we can. The Waterlogged Grove can... Well, do we just go for the Blossoming Defense now? I think we might just go for it since our... Well, maybe not. Let's go ahead and animate this, and then we'll think about that in just a second. Okay, so we don't quite have enough to get rid of the Liliana. It might be worthwhile just to ditch the land. Although if they have Inquisition, that feels pretty bad. But they're also at 0 cards in hand. Yeah, if they just plus, we discard the Wooded Foothills, and then we've got the Blossoming Defense. So they have to have a removal spell. So I imagine they probably plus the Liliana. If they don't plus the Liliana, that tells me that they have a removal spell. In which case, we can just be patient. Wrench Mind. That kind of sucks. However, if we draw... If we draw a land, we get to put them at 9 poison. If we draw a pump spell, we're good to go. There's Scale Up. So they've got 0 cards in hand. Let's see. Let's go ahead and tap our mana. And we're going to scale up the Inkmoth Nexus. And we want to attack our opponent because, as nice as it is, killing Liliana, we like to kill our opponents more. And there we go. There's the match. So, kind of took it down there against the mono-black control. You know, lots of removal spells and pox effects can be very taxing on our limited resources, but we still got them. So right now we are 2-0. So first time, well, oh, come on. Hate that. Alright. Nope. We want to be a part of our game. Yeah, kind of a bug here. I don't really know why it keeps doing this. Let's try to join this instead. Let's just go ahead and close Magic Online really quick. We'll get back to it. All right. Sorry for the interruption there. Shaper seems good. It is pretty good. Alright, let's get back to it. Wow. Alright. We want 2 players. Starchild Phoenix. Alright. So, unfortunately we don't get to be on the play this time, but, you know, sometimes an opponent playing a tap land on turn 1 is an indicator that we're going to get to be moving pretty quickly. So, we have Become Immense and we have Mutagenic Growth and we got 2 threats as well. Let's keep this. And, you know, we got a couple of lands here. So we got mana sources, got threats, got pump spells. So we're going to lead off on a Misty Rainforest first. And because we already have a blue source, we're just going to get a regular old forest. However, against island decks, maybe it's smart to go ahead and get your non-basics in case they're, you know, Field of Ruin, Path to Exile decks. You know, it feels really bad not to get to search your land out. Yep, as I, well, you know, kind of anticipated. Path to Exile. And we are A-okay with that, and this is exactly why we want to fetch out our non-basics. So let's see what we get. Let's go ahead and play out... I think we'll play out the Inkmoth Nexus. That way if they remove our Glistener Elf, then we can also, you know, activate our Inkmoth Nexus. Not looking like we're going to get to use this Become Immense too early. So we've got Teferi. He is pretty annoying. So let's think. If we draw a fetch land, we can put 1, 2, 3, 4 total cards in our graveyard, and we'd be down by 2 mana. Teferi's pretty annoying for our game plan, but I think we just want to... There's a Blossoming Defense. So how do we want to sequence this? I think we want to get the Waterlogged Grove down. We're probably just going to be using the Mutagenic Growth here. Can't quite... We just want to fill our... Although we can't use the Blossoming Defense. Maybe we should just, you know, go for as much as we can. I'm going to pay the life here. Yeah. Obviously, Teferi makes it difficult for our Blossoming Defenses to do much. So I'm going to go ahead and just load this guy up. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, you know what? We can just cast the Become Immense. How about we just win? That sounds better than... So there you go. Turn 3 kill with Infect against Teferi. Teferi's a huge pain in the butt for us, so we want to take that into consideration. So against a blue-white deck with Path to Exile, I like Ichor as an extra threat. I really like Shaper Sanctuary. And I like Dispel as a way to counter some of their stuff. Wild Defiance, again, while I like it a lot, you know, then again, if we're going to be taxed pretty heavily on our, we're going to be taxed really heavily on our pump spells, then perhaps we want to have the Wild Defiance. That way, you know, we're just getting maximum amount of Infect off. So I'm going to take out the Dismember. I'm not particularly worried about Snapcaster Mages. Distortion Strike is obviously one of our worst ones. And again, we're on the draw, so I'll probably take out a Vines of the Vastwood, and it's a lot worse. It's just 2 mana, 4/4. In fact, I think I might end up taking another one out. I like the Spellskite, like the Blighted Agents. Obviously, we just want our threat density. Worth considering that Wild Defiance gets worse as we take out more things that target our guys, so maybe we only want... Well, let's try both of them. You know, I'm here to try cards out, so let's submit this. All right, what do we have here? All right, we got several pump spells. And we got a threat. We got lands. So I'm happy to have this. And I think what we'll do is go ahead and get all of our fetch lands off. We just do not want to draw lands. And again, we're going to go for the non-basics because they have Path to Exile and most likely Field of Ruin. We're going to go for the Glistener Elf. You know, it is worth noting that they could have a Path to Exile right away, and that leaves us stranded on the threats. However, You know, if we just wait and wait and wait for our opponent to accumulate their resources, we're probably going to end up getting a little too far behind. So with the blue decks, we just want to get in as fast as possible. Although, you know, maybe we should have held on to the Vines of the Vastwood. But we got Spell Pierce for Teferi. You know, we've got a total of 13 threats in our deck. That's just one. So, you know, a fifth of our deck is threats. We'll draw into it. I'm feeling pretty optimistic about it. So hopefully they play, you know, like a Teferi that we can Spell Pierce. Oh wow, they're just stuck on lands. Now I really wish that I'd taken it a little easier on the Glistener Elf. How much damage do we have? It is possible to kill your opponent by attacking with a Noble Hierarch. Scale Up does a really good job of enabling that. I think we're just going to attack with this Noble Hierarch. So our opponent's at 16. So we can do, with the Exalted trigger, do 5, 9, 13, 15. So, if we save our Vines of the Vastwood for last, we could just kill our opponent by attacking with the Noble Hierarch, and I think that's what we're going to do. Inkmoth Nexus. Yep, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to kill them with Noble Hierarch. Remand. Sure thing. Now, if we are going to go all in on this Noble Hierarch, then the Inkmoth Nexus plan is not going to pan out. We're going to save the Vines of the Vastwood, and obviously we can't cast it. So here we get to leave up the Spell Pierce to protect our Noble Hierarch, and we'll have enough mana for Vines of the Vastwood. So in Infect, you don't necessarily need an Infect creature. You know, Noble Hierarch is also a threat if you have enough pump spells. So they need a Path to Exile. Oh, you know what? Guess what? We're going to main phase this Vines of Vastwood. Make them deal with it. We've got Spell Pierce and Blossoming Defense. So let's see what they've got. Opponent's at 4 life. Echoing Truth. So, here we get to Blossoming Defense, and if they have a counter spell, then we've got the Spell Pierce. There we go. So, just won 2-0 versus blue-white control. They did get stuck on lands, but hey, you know, we didn't really have an Infect creature, and we managed to take it down with Noble Hierarch. There we go. So, 3-0. Another nice thing about Infect is the games tend to go pretty quickly. So what do we have here? We are on the draw. We've got a couple threats, some disruption, and some pump spells as well as lands, so we're going to keep it. So I would expect Inquisition or Thoughtseize here. Yep, Inquisition. They will probably take our Glistener Elf. Yep. It's okay, it's going to happen. We don't have any blue spells yet, so... Then again, Jund has Assassin's Trophy. But they also... Well, they don't play Fulminator Mage in the main, usually. Now let's just get the Forest. Jund is definitely a very difficult matchup for us. Wow. You know, they've got the hand disruption element, you know, can be pretty good when they're on the play. Okay, so take that back. We're against Mardu. Tide Hollow Sculler. So we are going to go ahead and which member? We're going to dismember that. So they are going to get a card out of our hand. However, we get to choose which card it is. So we've got just a ton of pump spells. If we have a threat, I think we're going to be good to go. Wait a minute, what? Oh, you know what? We made a mistake. Well, that feels pretty terrible. I guess the way that the triggers were ordered, we didn't get to keep our scale up. But, you know, we got Inkmoth Nexus. Inkmoth Nexus is going to be pretty good against our opponent's game plan. As long as they don't have a removal spell for it, but, you know, we're going to use our Forest to activate Inquisition. Sure. Not much we can do about that. So here's how we're going to sequence this. We're going to go ahead and activate the Inkmoth. We're going to attack. And we'll go ahead and play the Glistener Elf. What does our opponent have? Perhaps Yawgmoth? Nope, Ranger Captain of Eos. Okay, so here I'm going to guess they're going for Death Shadow. Yep, so it looks like we're against Mardu Death Shadow. Thoughtseize. Sure thing, dude. I imagine they probably take the Vines. I guess Blossoming Defense is a little cheaper. I think I'm going to take advantage of this Distortion Strike now. The rebound will be really nice. Perhaps we should have played the Distortion Strike on the Inkmoth Nexus. Of course, then again, tough call on that one. I think I prefer to use it on the Glistener Elf. Yep, so our opponent's last card in hand is going to be the Death Shadow. One of the nice things about poison counters not reducing your opponent's life total, you don't make their Death Shadows bigger. So here they want to raise, so they're going to get a 4/4 Death Shadow. So here we're going to get to rebound this Distortion Strike. Wow. If they want to sacrifice their threat in order to prevent us from casting that Distortion Strike, I'm okay with that. Because, let's see. We have Scale Up. And while we can't cast it right now, we are going to be able to present lethal. So our opponent needs a hand disruption spell, you know, a removal spell. But they are playing off the top of their deck now. I would certainly appreciate a I'm going to go ahead and block this. It's going to be tough if our opponent has a removal spell, however... You know, we just want to play as conservatively as we can. Let's see. I think we just go for the scale up now. You know, if they have the removal spell, they have it. And we got him. Sweet. Not sure what their last card was, but we got him. So against Mardu Death Shadow, got game 1. Okay, so against Death Shadow, we want the Shaper Sanctuaries to help us draw some cards. We want the additional threat. We also want Dismember to help deal with their threats. Although Dismember is probably not a super reliable way to deal with Death Shadow, but Reality Shift is. Don't see Ceremonious Rejection, don't see... Let's take out the things that we're not really considering first. That's always a good way to approach sideboarding. Okay, so the cards we're considering are going to be... Let's see. The Hand Disruption is going to be difficult, so we have to think, how are we going to help hedge against the Hand Disruption? So Spell Pierce is going to do it. Dispel is not going to help against the Hand Disruption, however it will help against removal spells. That being said, it can only help us against removal spells. Let's see here, do we really want the Dismembers? Starting to think that we do not. The question is, do we want the Wild Defiances as well? You know what, they're already clock us pretty well. I think I'll take out the Dismembers. They just have Death Shadow. Then we can always fly over it and do unblockable for him. In which case, the Ichor Claw Mirror is not great. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's going to get to do anything but trade most of the time, and it's just a more expensive threat. Become Immense is going to be a tough one, although it is an instant speed one. Let's see, Scale Up seems like it is going to be a little bit worse. Yeah, Sorcery Speed is a little bit worse. Therefore, we're going to want to take out Might of Old Krosa and probably the Groundswell. We want as much of the ones that are going to help us against removal as possible. Distortion Strike seems like it's going to be fine. You know, let's take out the Become Immense. You know, we're adding more permanence to our battlefield, so Become Immense gets worse. Alright, what do we got here? So, we got threats, we got a pump spell, and we've got lots of Noble Hierarchs. We're on the draw, so we have an opportunity to draw more pump spells. They immediately cycle Street Wraith. What do they have? Thoughtseize. Man, they're just losing all kinds of life. We lose our threat, but we got an opportunity to draw more. Let's get down this Pendelhaven. I don't feel like playing with my life total quite yet. They cycle another Street Wraith, and they Fatal Push. You know, oh, looks like our opponent is stuck on land. Here we have to decide if we're going to use our Noble Hierarch to try to kill them. I think we are. We got plenty of green sources here. Sweet. Okay, how are we going to deal with this Death Shadow? Probably with our high life total. they are a little short on lands. And we only have to attack them for a total of 10. Another Death Shadow. That's pretty rough. A pump spell there would have been really helpful. However, we do have lots of Noble Hierarchs here. We want them to block, so we'll use this Waterlogged Grove to activate. Then we're going to use the Pendelhaven to pump. We're going to hit him for 4 poison. And I think we're going to block one Noble Hierarch, but not the other. Or with one, but not the other. We'll see. If our opponent has Dismember, then we die. However, they've already played... Have they already played a Dismember? They have. So do they have a way to lose 3 life? Let's see. If they have a way to lose 3 life, they don't have Thoughtseize, or they would have used it already. Basically, they just have to have another Dismember, I believe. So in that case, we lose out on 1 point. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we're just going to risk it and take it. If they have the Dismembers, they have it. Okay. So we've got to watch out for a removal spell. So here we're really looking for like a Vines of Vastwood or a Spell Pierce or a Blossoming Defense. They're going to get to draw a card. Vines of the Vastwood is pretty good. So they know that we have it. I believe they looked at our library. So here we get to use the Mutagenic Growth. Although they don't know that we have the Mutagenic Growth. Oh yes, we got him. Sweet. So sometimes with this deck you kind of just have to take risks and go for it if you want to win. But there you have it. So far we are 4-0 with Infect. So we played against Blue-White Control, Mono-Black Control, played against Mardu Shadow, which is, you know, I consider that to be a tier 1 deck right now, and also the multicolored Elementals deck. Oh, and we get to be on the play. Always something nice that you want in Infect. So what do we have here? We have no lands. Doesn't really matter what else we have. Oh boy. So this is kind of your Infect territory. Just like with any combo deck, you could have some issues, but you know, we're rewarded here. So what are the things that we want to dump? Let's see. I think we want to get rid of the Noble Hierarch. We've got the Glistener Elf, but if they have a removal spell, what does that leave us? That leaves us with Inkmoth Nexus. So that's a flying creature that can also... So I think we're going to get rid of... Though Noble Hierarch lets us accelerate. You know, we got plenty of pump spells, so let's get rid of a Blossoming Defense and a Forest. And I think we're probably going to lead with the Noble Hierarch. Although we can play the Noble Hierarch and immediately pump. You know, we've got another threat here. Let's just go for the... Well, let's play the Noble Hierarch. You know, it'll let us draw out some removal potentially. Give us access to more mana. Ooh, Celestial Colonnade. So, let's see. We could always play the Glistener Elf and the Blighted Agent. Let's go ahead and do that. We just want to get as many threats down as possible. This will force our opponent to have several removal spells. And I'm going to attack with both these creatures. Yes, I could get an Exalted trigger, but if they have a removal spell, then it won't have provided any poison. I'm not quite ready to use the scale up yet because we have no... I just don't want to fire off a scale up into open mana. Path to exile the Blighted Agent. You know what? That's okay. Let's get our forest. We're still going to get one poison off. And I think we'll go ahead and crack the Waterlogged Grove to inform our decisions. There's a Blossoming Defense. That is something that I do want to use the in conjunction with the scale up. Okay, so we're going to be attacking with the Glistener Elf. Field of Ruin can kill our Inkmoth Nexus. This makes me believe... Oh, you know what we can do? We can animate it. And we can Blossoming Defense it. So now our opponent is actually not going to get to have their land. So if we draw a removal spell, we win. Or not a removal spell, a pump spell. So our opponent's going to be at 8 poison. So let's get down our Blighted Agent. And I don't think there's anything that they can do right now. They could use the Field of Ruin. And then perhaps oust or path to exile something. Hopefully we draw. Sweet. So I don't foresee our opponents winning. Either they die or we can just Vines of the Vastwood, whatever they don't. They could have Force of Negation. Nope, but we get them. So there's game 1 against blue-white control. Okay, against blue-white control, we want the counter spells. We want the Shaper Sanctuary. We want an extra threat, and I like these Wild Defiances quite a bit. So let's go ahead. The Distortion Strikes are pretty poor. Not a big fan of Become Immense. Let's see, Groundswell's pretty decent. Let's think here. Scale Up is Sorcery Speed, which is a little poorer against them. However, it does lead to our fastest wins, but it requires the most amount of help. This is a more expensive one here with Vines of the Vastwood, and let's see, where's the Groundswell? Just not a huge fan of that one. Alright. Okay. This looks pretty decent. We're going to start off with a Noble Hierarch and help, you know, catch us up when it comes to mana. Looks like our opponent mulligans to 6, which is always nice, and they play a tap land, so no opting. Alright, let's go ahead and get out this forest. Get our Noble Hierarch down. Ooh. So, how do we want to play this out? Let's go ahead and tap the Pendelhaven. Do we want to play Ichorclawmer or Blighted Agent? I think while we have the Noble Hierarch, we'll go ahead and play the Blighted Agent. If they remove it, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a Spell Snare here. Maybe a Mana Leak. Sure. So what are we thinking about? Perhaps it would have been smarter to lead with the Spell Skite. If they want to counter that, then we can still get a threat down. Yeah, let's go ahead and get down a Spell Skite. Do we want to do that? Maybe not. I think I want to play the Wild Defiance, although that'd be better next turn. You know what, let's just go with the Glistener Elf for now and attack with the Noble Hierarch. The reason I only want to go with the Glistener Elf is because next turn they're going to have access to Supreme Verdict, and I'm not quite ready to get completely blown out by that. Academy Ruins is kind of an interesting one. Yeah, here's that Supreme Verdict. So now we still have a threat. We are down a mana. Let's see. I think we'll just go ahead and get down the Ichorclawmer. They only have 3 cards left. They didn't demonstrate any use of Path to Exile earlier, and if they path our mirror, we're kind of happy to have the land. Doesn't feel great, but you know, we still have plenty of threats that we can draw. Probably Vendilion Click. Sure. I would imagine they probably get rid of the Spell Skite. If they don't get rid of the Spell Skite, we'll play this. Oh, they choose. Did they choose themselves? Nope. They just didn't want to get rid of anything we had. Let's get down the Spell Skite. I kind of want to cycle this Waterlogged Grove. So here we're just kind of hoping that we can get a threat. Stoneforge Mystic is pretty good. So it's the first Stoneforge deck that we've encountered so far. You know, I personally think that unbanning Stoneforge Mystic was a pretty serious mistake. You know, what we could do is get down this Wild Defiance. And we could always kill them with Spell Skite. I mean, let's see, we can add 6, 12. Yeah, we can actually just kill our opponent next turn if they choose to go ham. And if they go to equip anything, let's see. I wonder if equip is a targeting ability. If it is, I'm going to make them put the Sword of Feast and Famine on my spell skite. Let's see. What's that? What's that?
Equip is a targeting ability.
Yeah. I hope they try to equip the sword. I'll take your sword, please. Wait, what? That's a little frustrating. We'll discard a scale up. This doesn't change our clock, so we're just going to get the breeding pool. And we want to go ahead and cycle here. I would imagine they probably block. Wouldn't that be funny if they just let this go? I mean, we could always be bluffing. They could always animate the Celestial Colonnade. I mean, I highly doubt we're going to be able to get our opponent. My guess is they just, you know, animate. The Colonnade. Or they just block it with the Stone Forge. Maybe put down a Batter Skull or something like that. Yep, Batter Skull gets us. Well done, opponent. Yeah, it kind of is a big bummer. That's okay. So maybe we do want another Dismember to deal with V-Click, Stoneforge, and some of their other guys. Wild Defiance is not something we want extras of. Let's see. Scale Up is a little bit better on the play. Maybe we'll trim the Dispel. However, I think we really... Then again, we're only really countering Path to Exile. Let's go ahead and get this Scale Up. We just want to kill him as quickly as we can. Ichor Claw Mirror is probably a little worse on the play. I think we're going to take the Groundswell. Well, Vines of Aswood does protect a creature. Let's go ahead and submit this. And we do want to play first. Yeah, this looks pretty good. We're going to get the Snowball Hierarch down ASAP. Opponent mulligans, which is helpful for us. Let's get our breeding pool. We want to maximize the effectiveness that our opponent's Path to Exile and Field of Ruin has against us. Sweet. I kind of want to use this Noble Hierarch mana. If that's the case, then let's leave up the Breeding Pool. That way we have Spell Pierce and Blossoming Defense, depending on what we want here. I'm definitely going to be Spell Piercing, because next turn... Let's see, how's this going to work? So next turn we can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So they have to have Path to Exile or a counterspell here. Oh, you know what? We missed the Pendelhaven activation. Well, that feels bad. It's okay. We'll just play the other Noble Hierarch. They have Opt, so we've got the Blossoming Defense. So they need 2 removal spells. Hopefully they play Teferi. Okay. What do they have? Oh, yes. There we go. Maybe they had a Stoneforge Mystic and... Whew! Alright. So, despite our mistake, we got a little lucky there. You know, we could have just won with the Blossoming Defense, although, you know, you can't just jam it when you know that they have a removal spell, or at least you suspect one, so there we go. There's the 5-0 tournament practice with Infect. Okay. Let's see here. Yep, so one of the big mistakes we made a couple mistakes throughout that run. The last one being we forgot to activate the Pendelhaven before we scaled up. Obviously, Pendelhaven only works on 1/1 creatures. You know, one of the other mistakes that we made during that same match is we learned that Spellskite cannot force your opponent to equip one of their swords to your creature. You know, here Ulfilven points out equipment says creature you control, so can't steal that with the Spellskite, which is a bit of a bummer. But overall, I think we did pretty good in that one. Let's go back here and take a look at the deck list. Where are we? Okay. So, let's go ahead and change display modes here so we can see everything. If you're looking for, I mean, most of our kills were between turn 2 and turn 4. So, obviously we played against 2 blue-white control decks there in that 5-match run. And we saw that it can just be too fast for them. I mean, if they play a if we're on the play, they play a Celestial Colonnade on their turn, and we get a, you know, turn 1 Glistener Elf, then we can just scale up and like Mightable Croso and kill them on turn 2. Sometimes we can just be too fast for those decks. But, you know, Infect has been a very popular deck for a while, and if you're looking to find some kind of direction while this metagame sorts itself out, and you just want to kill your opponent, I highly recommend trying out Infect. So, thanks for joining me. For those of you that are watching on stream, I'm going to be playing some Draft on Magic Arena, Core Set 2020, here in just a little bit, so stand by for that. Joining me on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and this has been Luke's MTG. Hope you have a great day.